So one time when I was living in Colorado, I was stationed at Fort Carson, and my wife and I were engaged, and we were out looking for houses. And we drove to a town called Falcon and went to go look at some houses. And on the way back from looking at houses, I saw this big dust devil on the left-hand side of the street. And because it's a 2-lane highway, one each way. And I'm like, wow, that's huge. And I'm like, wow, there's a pickup truck in there. And there's this pickup truck just going head over head over head, and it was kicking up all this dust. So I pull off to the side of the road, because at the time I still had my EMT certification. I was a firefighter in New York. And I went to the truck, and it was stopped on its roof. And I helped the lady get out, and she had a broken leg, and I'm talking to the driver, and he's pinned in there. He's got a head injury. And by this time, some more bystanders are coming by, and I'm talking to him, and I'm doing, making sure he's alert and orientated, checking him out, making sure, what's hurting and what's not. Well, then somebody else is like, there's a van over there. And I look, and there's a van, and the whole front of it's just smashed in. I'm like, oh. So I talked to the bystanders. I'm like, hey, look. I was like, I need you to stay with him, and I need you to keep talking to him. And if he loses consciousness, you come and get me, all right? But I need you to keep talking to him, all right? So I'm running over to the van. And as I come up to the van, a lady's like, don't go over there. It's bad. So my mind just starts going like all kinds of bad ways. And I find the driver, and he's slumped over the steering wheel, and everything's been compressed in. And his arm is barely hanging on. It's been amputated. And he's just moaning in pain. And I'm like, hey, brother, I got you. And I tried to open up the door, and it wouldn't open. And I tried to open up the passenger door. It wouldn't open. I tried to open the sliding door. It wouldn't open. The whole vehicle got tweaked. So I had to break out the back window and climb in there to assess him. Well, then somebody was walking by, and I grab him. I'm like, hey, look, I need you to call 911. They call 911, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, hey, look, this is what we've got. We've got a rollover with a patient with a head injury trapped over here. I got this person in here. I need a helicopter. Because we're out in the middle of nowhere. I was like, I need a helicopter for this guy. And I was like, I need you to send 2 fire departments, because there's in a rural area, so it's probably going to be 2 volunteer fire departments. And we needed 2 sets of extrication equipment. I'm sitting here calling in the helicopter, calling in the fire department, stuff like that. Long story short, it took about 40 minutes to get this gentleman out of the car. And my wife at the time is just sitting in the car on the side of the road. And all she sees me is go into the back of a vehicle and nothing. And I come out, and I'm covered in blood and everything like that. And after we got him out into the helicopter, and my wife's just like looking at me, and I'm just covered in blood. And my hands are shaking because I was holding C-spine for so long. And I go over to the ambulance. I'm like, hey, you guys got some saline I can wash my hands off? And she's like, you okay? I was like, well, I have muscle fatigue. But my wife, she was like, I didn't know what happened to you. Don't do that again, and stuff like that. So that's probably one of the craziest stories that I've ever been involved with relationship to real estate. And I wasn't even a realtor. Just had I not been looking at houses that day, I wouldn't have come across it. Unfortunately, everybody survived. That gentleman lost his arm, but it was a bad day. It could have gotten worse.